Well, guys, I'm back. So good to be here, sitting in this beautiful, colorful chair space that I've got. Um, yeah, it's been a minute, but as we all know, Road to UFC was just a couple days ago. And guys, so good. So good to see just like finish after finish after finish on this amazing show. This is the thing that I get up for every single year. At this point, I skip a lot of MMA, and there's a lot of it that is not compelling to me anymore. These Apex shows, these locationless, just kind of events that happen in open space, just have taken a lot of the fun out of the sport. But I tell you what, the atmosphere at the Shanghai PI is better than the UFC Apex. It doesn't feel like we're just watching an episode of The Ultimate Fighter. They actually can cut to the Chinese fans during the show, and it feels like they have upped the production at Road to UFC. The lighting is better. It seems like the space is not just a cage thrown on an exercise floor, but it's actually a venue. I was so impressed with how they upgraded the show, the format as a whole. It's still the same Road to UFC. It's still the tournament format, non-tournament fights, 4 weight classes. In a lot of ways, it's the same, but they did make some changes that I think really upgraded and elevated the experience as a whole. For one, I appreciate this. They made the show a couple hours later in the day. I don't know if you remember this, but so for me on the West Coast, it would start at like 1 a.m. I was getting up at 12:55, something like that, in the middle of the night, and it would be dark for the majority of the show. For me, this time it started at 4 a.m. On the East Coast in the US, it started at 7 a.m., probably took you till about noon or 11 o'clock. And that's a big deal. I think a lot of promotions don't fully realize, you don't always have to have the American audience, but it definitely helps. Once you get the American media, the American fans, you get all the vibrations going out through social media, you're just going to be able to grow your product a lot faster. And when I see promotions like PFL not even putting their broadcasts of their international events on YouTube, not even making a way for American fans to watch it, it just feels like you're getting in your own way. And by the simple change of putting Road UFC a few hours later in the day, I think that helped grow the audience a lot better. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the point system, the bonuses. The bonuses, those went out to Keiichiro Nakamura and to Sulong Rongbo versus Peter Danaso. I believe both those fighters both got performance bonuses. And adding those extra incentives, I think, really helped to add some life into the system. The point system, it's only there to help to boost the contract that a fighter could win. I'm not sure exactly how the point system works just yet, but it's not a focus of the format. They're not talking about it. They're not tallying things up and showing you these graphics on the screen throughout the events and the different rounds of the tournament. And thank God, we don't need a pseudo wannabe PFL. We need just that simple tournament format, and the points are just there to affect the amount that fighters can earn on their contracts. What I'm hoping is that they can actually earn more than the contracts that they actually had in the past. I hope that they are able to learn, when it started, it was around like a $25,000 contract per fight, something like that, better than the 10 and 10 that fighters from Contender Series get. Hopefully, it's even a little bit better. And then you got the performance bonuses as well. I'm not sure. People are saying that's what made the difference between like season 3 of Road UFC versus season 4, but I think it is a lot of times just the mix of fighters, the matchups, and then what round of the tournament is. I think it'll be really interesting to see how the semis go. It feels like that semifinal round is usually the slowest round of the three. It's the round that fighters are really trying to preserve. And think about this too. The opening round, you're getting fighters from all across Asia. There's a higher chance of mismatches happening. When it always is curious to me when promotions are starting to brag about how many finishes they have in their promotion. I mean, it's a noteworthy stat, but to me, a promotion with a ridiculously high amount of finishes usually signifies a lot of mismatches. Finishes are much more prone to happen when there's uneven matchmaking. So you're going to get a lot more of that in that first round. You think about the fight between Mridal Saikia and Agulali. Even though Saikia was 8-0, had never fought anybody of the caliber of Agulali. You're going to have a lot more finishes in that open round. The second round, you're going to get a lot more even matchmaking. And then even the last round of the tournament, even more. So you're always going to see the most finishes in that opening round. I don't know if we can necessarily say that that's the reason we had such a turn between season 3 and season 4. Again, just the fighters that you get that particular night, a lot of intangibles, but happy to see it regardless. It was cool to see so many people sharing the knockouts, the finishes from that opening round of Road UFC Season 4. A lot of outstanding fighters. I could go through the long list of them. Sulong Rongbo, Keiichiro Nakamura, Lee Kai-Wen, so many great looking fighters in Road to UFC. But here's another thing I want to talk about. They also are making this whole thing a lot more easy to follow. The last 3 seasons, they wouldn't really even emphasize the bracket. They didn't show it during the opening round. Sometimes it was kind of like shown briefly later in the season, maybe in the semifinal round, but they really made it a big emphasis in the broadcast of this opening round. You always knew who was going to fight who next. Immediately when the fights were over, you knew their next opponent. And I also really appreciate that they told us the date for the semifinal round. It's August 22nd in Shanghai, a day before UFC Shanghai, which both of these events take place at the Shanghai Indoor Stadium. We know the date. We know the semifinal matchups. They can even bring fighters out, do face-offs. It's so much easier to follow. What you need in a tournament is you need clarity. You need to know who's fighting who, what's at stake. Are we going to see a rematch? If this fighter beats this fighter, are we going to see a rematch in the next round? There's the whole narrative of Sim Kai-shong potentially fighting Peter Daniso. That didn't happen because Daniso ended up losing the Sulong Rongbo, but that was something that we could at least talk about. It would be crazy if we got to see that rematch, as much as Sim Kai-shong and honestly Peter Daniso has improved since their first meeting. Before I get into some of the heavier stuff, I also wanted to cover the non-tournament fights. We had 3 non-tournament fights. It seems like the Road to UFC non-tournament fights are a little bit harder to get the contract than even Contender Series. Contender Series, it's almost like all you have to do is win and not put Dana White to sleep, and you're getting a contract. With Road to UFC, you have to have a spectacular knockout to get signed right away. As far as my memory serves me, Wang Song and Zhang Mingyang may have been the only fighters to just like immediately get a UFC contract the first time that they showed up on Road to UFC in these non-tournament fights. Both really dominant, really incredible finishes. Now, in this 4th season, you had Kit Campbell you had Arisa Matsuda, and you had Manshir Kara all winning their non-tournament fights. I'll go through them one by one. Arisa Matsuda, I would say, probably is not going to get a UFC contract. I'm guessing they'll probably put her in another non-tournament fight in August against another strawweight. And the reason I say that, first of all, the fight went to a decision. It wasn't the most exciting fight from Matsuda's end. I actually think Feng Chaocan fought a fairly good fight. Takedown defense just wasn't really there. Matsuda wrestled a lot, but didn't really deliver a lot of damage, not a lot of submission attempts. Was it more of just a controlling performance from her? I doubt the UFC signs her. Now, with the kick that they've had signing Japanese talent, and as much as like we're just trying to get more talent into the strawweight division, that's what would make me not totally shocked if they signed Matsuda. But honestly, I'd be surprised if they signed her. They'll probably give her another fight against, who knows, a Dong Huaxiang, potentially one of these other fighters that competed in the first season of Road UFC. That wouldn't totally surprise me, especially Dong is a wrestler as well. So put Matsuda against another wrestler, see how she fares, potentially turns into a striking fight. We really get to see that tested from her. But I don't think that she gets signed. As far as Manshir Kara, I actually think that he may have the best chance of getting signed. He's a US-based fighter. He's 33 years old. He's 9-0. He's undefeated. He had a dominant performance. His grappling is incredible. And I know he's not, he doesn't have Indian nationality, but any connection that the UFC can make to Indian fans, I think that they're going to see that as really valuable. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they signed him. He's, you got to think, like, if he was on the Contender Series, why would Manshir Kara? I'm guessing that he probably was slotted to be on the Contender Series, but for whatever reason, they just gave him the call up early and said, "Hey, can you come out here?" Because of that, I gotta think that they're gonna see his fight similar to the Contender Series. If this fight was on the Contender Series, I think he'd probably get the contract. As good as he looked, he's 9-0, he's 33 years old. Why not? Let's go ahead and give him the shot. So I think that Manshir Kara probably has, like, I'd say like 70, 80%. These contracts, you got to realize, not always given out right away. Sometimes they sit on things for a while. There might be some negotiation, but I do think that they'll probably offer him a contract. Kit Campbell is the third one, and he kind of blew through Shogo Sato. Sato did not look great. Japan as a whole, which is something I'll get to in a second. Japan did not look great in Road UFC this year, barring a few exceptions, but Kit Campbell blows through Shogo Sato, beats him in, I think, less than a minute in their non-tournament welterweight fight. Campbell, in one sense, you could say, like, what more would he need to do? But you know, those like Road to UFC fights are sometimes like the non-tournament fights. You really you show your best and then you get invited back. So maybe they'll bring Kit Campbell back for a non-tournament fight. I think it's still probably more likely than not that he gets offered a UFC contract, especially he made a really smart call out of Tai Laka, who he was supposed to fight in this non-tournament fight. He called him out for the August Shanghai UFC event. I think that's a really smart fight. Tai Laka has been needed, like, basically on the doorstep, right, standing in the doorway of the UFC for a long time. And like, I actually talked to a UFC employee about Tai Laka last year, and it seemed like they were just kind of like wanting to see a couple more things out of him, some really little things, just to make sure that he was really going to be ready for the UFC. They gave him this additional opportunity at season 4 opening round, but who knows, they could just sign him to the UFC to say, you know, what the heck, we'll take the chance. I think that's a great idea. Put him against Kit Campbell, make it the opening fight for UFC Shanghai, and that's going to be fireworks for sure. You know, that's going to be an incredible fight. So I brought up Arisa Matsuda. I brought up Shogo Sato. Let's talk about Japan for a second. Japan went 2-7 in the Road UFC this year. In fact, I'm going to bring up all of the numbers of the countries here. And, there's a lot of countries that just had one fighter. They lost that fight, Thailand, India, of course, not including Mansour Kara in that tally, but China did pretty well. South Korea did pretty well. You see there, even Australia. Australia looked great. New Zealand went 2-0. But man, you look at Japan, 2-7. What's going on there? Like, this is the show that got us Rei Tsuruya, that got us Rinya Nakamura. Really good prospects, but what's happened since then? Why are we not just cranking out these guys? It seemed like it was like this last year as well. Not a lot of Japanese talent came out of it, but I think to think about this, you have to think about the pipelines that exist in some of these Asian countries. Think about Indonesia. Your pipeline is through One Pride. If you're an aspiring MMA fighter, you're a prospect coming up, you really are just looking at One Pride MMA and Changgu Fight Night. Those are your main promotions there. And even there, you're probably not going to make a lot of money with One Pride MMA. One Pride's got the connection with UFC. They consult and basically send the fighters over to Road to UFC. So there's a direct pipeline with China. You've got the Shanghai PI. That's their whole scouting mechanism. And they use that to help negotiate fighters out of their contracts into the UFC. If you're someone like Huang Yuela, who is the WLF featherweight champion, the WLF does have fighters that are locked down in contracts, but a lot of times UFC can get them out of that. They can negotiate with JCK. They can sometimes do the same, not always. We saw a fighter like Aili Mulata-Bieka staying with JCK. He's supposed to fight in June against a TBA opponent. But really, the pipeline doesn't go that far. You're not going to make a lot of money unless you're a JCK tournament winner. You're not going to make a lot of money fighting within China. Now, if we're talking about Japan, you got some options. Not only can you stay within Pancrase or Shudo, these pretty old promotions, you're not going to make a ton of money with them, but a lot of times you do see them locked up in contracts with these promotions. But if you're going to Ryzen, man, I mean, hardly a better promotion to fight for in the world right now than Ryzen. They're paying out a lot of money, and you don't even have to have this illustrious record. You look at someone like Ren Hiramoto, who's made a great name for himself fighting in Japan. He's only got, like 6 or 7 fights to his record, and is probably making a lot more money than a lot of UFC fighters are. So if you're a Japanese fighter, Ryzen may be your destination. You're seeing Ryzen snatch up a lot of these really top Japanese talent. Your Kiyoma Akimoto's, even Makoto Shinru Takahashi. A lot of the best fighters are not available for Road UFC because they're going straight up towards Ryzen. So really, I think that's what you're starting to see. I think the talent pool, the selection for Japan, you're not getting their best fighters being available, and Road UFC is really starting to feel that. Some of the fighters from the top are going over to the UFC, like Kyoji Horiguchi and like Kai Asakura. For the most part, you're getting the best Chinese fighters in Road UFC. You're getting the best Korean fighters, and more or less in Road UFC. Even the best Indonesian fighters. India, not so much. That's kind of a different situation with the contracts with MFN. But for the most part, you're getting the best fighters from a lot of these other countries. Japan, not so much. So that's my theory on why they had such a bad year this year. And speaking of Indian and Indonesian MMA, they just really... Man, guys, I don't know what to do about those two countries. They struck out once again. The first year was really the only exceptional year for Indonesia and India. You had Jeka Sargi breakthrough there. You had Anshul Jubli, who has not performed well in the UFC so far. I still think that he has a lot of potential, but he had a breakout season as well in that first season. And ever since then, guys, it's just been depressing strikeout after depressing strikeout, just fighter after fighter coming up from these two countries, just totally getting flatlined in the cage. And I think that it's time to I think it's time for another break for these two countries. We were supposed to get Chungren Koren. We didn't get Angad Bisht. I'm not really sure why. I think it was because of an injury. He is supposed to fight August 2nd at MFN 17, so he's going to be going back to MFN. But I think that we just really, really got to be sure that we got fighters that are ready for the UFC. We had Denny Dafa and we had Rio Tirto, which, if you were to ask me, I would have told you these are the two guys to bring in from Indonesia. I just think that they probably weren't tested, especially Denny Dafa, not really tested well enough. I think we just need to have a little bit or a lot more confidence before we bring fighters in from India and Indonesia. You can see it as good experience for them. It helps them to realize what their biggest weaknesses are, but there needs to be, and the UFC started doing this, but I think that it's time that we bring some Indian and Indonesian fighters in greater quantities over to the Shanghai PI. I know they've probably got a capacity that they can take, but maybe if that means scaling down the number of Chinese fighters and splitting things a little bit more evenly at the Shanghai PI. But yeah, we've got to start having a really long-term vision, just like the UFC had this long-term vision of development for China that's really paying off now. We just got to have that with India and Indonesia. We got to bring really young Indonesian fighters. Let's bring like 12 of them over to the Shanghai PI, and let's target Road UFC Season 6 as a time frame to bring them in, because it's just been strikeout after strikeout. It's really honestly up to One Pride MMA. It's up to Canggu Fight Night in Indonesia. It's up to MFN to develop in the other Indian promotion, Bidang FC. It's going to be a minute, guys, before you see another fighter breakthrough. And even Anshul and Jekka have had their struggles within the UFC octagon. So it's going to be a while. And I would not be surprised, and in fact would probably welcome the idea of not bringing in any fighters from these two countries next year for Season 5. Let's build from the ground up. Let's let these fighters compete in their home countries. Let's send them off to some other international promotions. Fighters and fans from Indonesia and India have just had their hopes dashed one after the other. If anything, if you're going to see any success from fighters connected to these countries, it's going to be through guys like Mansour Kara. It's going to be through guys like Bilal Hassan. He's an American, but with Indonesian national or ethnicity. Fights out of Washington. Going to fight in CFFC. He's the flyweight champion. They're going to fight this summer. Hopefully Contender Series after that. What more can you say about India and Indonesia? It's back to the drawing board. So if you're a fan of these countries, I've said this over and over and over, but you're gonna have to have some thick skin. Chinese fans had thick skin for better part of a decade, and we've got a Chinese champion. We've got probably 15 fighters from China in the UFC. We're going to Shanghai again in August for probably our 5th Chinese event. We've got a PI in China. More and more promising prospects. So that came with a long-term vision. That came through a lot of investment from the UFC, a lot of buy-in that came through some finally healthy internal promotions. MFN, One Pride, I know it's easier said than done, but they need to be just increasing the frequency of these shows. We just haven't seen enough MFN shows this year. We haven't seen enough One Pride shows. These fighters are not getting in rotation often enough. Only a few shows in between these two promotions, in between Road UFC Season 3 and Season 4. I don't know what's going on with them, but we need to see more. We need to see more activity, fighters in greater rotation in these countries. That's a problem right now. And I know there's a lot of forces that I can't see. Potentially, I don't know this, but a lot of times when you see organizations reduce the number of shows, it's a matter of funding and getting over some potentially hurdles with the government. I don't know what it is, honestly, why they've reduced the number of shows, but I hope that it comes back. hope that we can see more and more of that. Hopefully get some of these promotions on a UFC Fight Pass, get them more exposure, some more funding. But yeah, fans, continue to support your fighters. I'll probably make more videos about Road to UFC going forward. For now, those are kind of my thoughts on Road to UFC. Had a blast. I woke up at 3:45 both days, and every day made myself a massive plate of cinnamon rolls, a huge glass of chocolate milk, some coffee, and enjoyed covering the fights. Hopefully you'll see more of me going forward. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I cover Chinese MMA, Road to UFC, sometimes even broader Asian MMA. But hope you have enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time.